You're nothing but a cheap toy, Isabella.
You have no idea who you're playing with.
You were never my wife, Amara. You were a cheap toy who learned how to wear my ring. Ethan Romano's words silenced the ballroom more completely than the orchestra stopping in the middle of a note. Beneath the crystal chandeliers of Manhattan's Imperial Crown Hotel, nearly 200 guests turned toward the woman standing beside him. Amara Hayes was 31 weeks pregnant, and one protective hand rested over her stomach. Her dark brown eyes remained steady, even as humiliation burned beneath her skin. Ethan, a white mafia boss whose name could empty a room, held a small digital recorder as though it justified every cruel word he had spoken. Minutes earlier, Claire Whitmore, his former fiancée and current communications advisor, had played him a conversation that appeared to capture Amara sharing his private schedule with a representative of the Belandi family. Claire now stood near the champagne table, dressed in silver and wearing sympathy like another expensive accessory. "Tell them the truth," Ethan demanded. "Tell everyone why you married me." Amara looked past him at the raised phones and familiar faces waiting for her to collapse. "Would the truth matter to you now?" she asked. "Or did you bring me here because you needed an audience?" Uncertainty entered Ethan's pale blue eyes, but pride buried it. "You used my name, my home, and my trust. I protected your name when the people closest to you were selling it." Claire released a soft laugh. "How convenient. She gets caught and suddenly she is the one protecting you?" Several guests exchanged glances. Ethan did not tell Claire to stop. That silence wounded Amara more deeply than the accusation. 6 months earlier, he had promised that she would never stand alone again. Now he was letting strangers treat her pregnancy as evidence in a public trial. A tightening crossed Amara's abdomen. She breathed slowly until it passed, refusing to give the room another piece of her pain. "Did you ever see me as your equal?" she asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Do not turn this into something it is not. Then answer me. Before the recording, was I your wife, or someone you believed should be grateful you chose her?" He said nothing. Amara removed her wedding band and placed it beside his untouched glass. The small sound of metal against crystal carried through the quiet room. "Before this night ends, you will understand what you threw away." She turned toward the exit, although another tightening forced her to slow. Near the doorway, hotel manager Matteo Russo noticed the crowned lion engraved on her antique pendant. Before moving to New York, Matteo had managed a Belandi-owned hotel in Palermo for 15 years. He knew the private family seal, and he knew Don Lorenzo Belandi was already in Manhattan for the acquisition negotiations. Matteo entered the service corridor and called an old secure number. "Don Lorenzo," he said when someone answered. "Your daughter has just been publicly disgraced." Amara had nearly reached the ballroom doors when Claire's voice followed her. "Leaving before anyone asks whether that baby was part of the arrangement?" The question stopped every whisper in the room. Amara turned slowly, one hand resting over the tightening beneath her ribs. Ethan looked toward Claire, but his warning came too late. He had permitted the first humiliation, and everyone understood that his silence had granted permission for the second. "My child is not a bargaining chip," Amara said. Her voice was quiet, yet it carried across the ballroom. "No one here has the right to discuss my baby as though a life belongs in a business ledger." Claire lifted her glass. "Then explain why you contacted the Belandi family without telling your husband." "I will explain myself to people seeking the truth, not to people who edited it." Ethan's attention sharpened. "Edited?" Amara met his gaze, but another contraction crossed her abdomen before she could answer. This one lasted longer. Her fingers closed around a nearby table, and Matteo hurried back into the ballroom. "Amara, are you all right?" "I need medical assistance," she said. Ethan crossed the distance between them. "I will take you." "No." The single word stopped him. "Amara, this is our child." It was our child when you let 200 people question whether I used this pregnancy to trap you. She did not raise her voice. You do not become my protector after becoming the reason I need protection. Mateo called emergency medical services while hotel staff cleared a private route through the lobby. Ethan reached for Amara's coat, but she accepted it from a female employee instead. Phones remained raised. Amara knew that by morning, strangers would reduce her marriage, pregnancy, and dignity to a few seconds of spectacle. She refused to give them tears. Outside, cold Manhattan air touched her face as paramedics guided her into the ambulance. Ethan followed, but Amara asked them not to let him ride with her. He stood on the sidewalk while the doors closed between them, still holding the recorder that had mattered more than her word. At Midtown Medical Center, the obstetric team confirmed that the baby's heartbeat was strong. Stress and dehydration had triggered contractions, but an examination showed no cervical change and no active preterm labor. The physician recommended intravenous fluids and overnight observation. Once the room became quiet, Amara pressed the crowned lion pendant between her fingers and called the number she had avoided throughout her marriage. Lorenzo answered immediately because Mateo had already reached him. I am safe, and so is the baby, Amara said. Do not punish anyone for me. I will decide what happens next. Does your husband know who you are? Lorenzo asked. Not yet. He believes he humiliated a woman with nowhere else to go. 12 blocks from the Imperial Crown, Lorenzo left the Manhattan hotel where he had been staying during the Bolandi negotiations. 3 black sedans pulled into the avenue behind him. Amara closed her eyes and finished. Tonight, he is going to learn how wrong he was. 29 years earlier, Lorenzo Bolandi had arrived in Baltimore expecting to settle a business dispute and leave within a week. Instead, he met Evelyn Hayes, a brilliant black attorney who refused to be impressed by his wealth, his name, or the men who lowered their voices around him. Evelyn helped move several Bolandi companies into legitimate American ownership, but she never allowed their private relationship to become another agreement Lorenzo could control. When Amara was born, he wanted to take mother and daughter to Sicily. Evelyn refused. She believed their child deserved a life in which strangers did not measure her worth by her father's influence. Lorenzo accepted one painful condition. Amara would carry her mother's last name, and her connection to the Bolandi family would remain outside public records. When a business rival later tried to expose Evelyn and the infant, that privacy became protection. Amara grew up in a modest row house near Patterson Park, knowing who her father was, but learning that power was safest when it did not need to announce itself. She attended public schools, earned scholarships, and built a career helping neighborhood organizations recover grants lost to corruption. She never used Lorenzo's money to purchase a position, and she wore the crowned lion pendant only because it had belonged to her grandmother. After Evelyn died following a long illness, Amara promised to preserve the independent life her mother had fought to give her. She met Ethan at a community development hearing in Manhattan, where he assumed she was simply a consultant challenging one of his companies over a housing dispute. Amara expected arrogance, yet he corrected the contract and protected the tenants from displacement. For months, he listened when she spoke and admired that she never feared him. When he proposed, he promised she would never become an ornament in his home or a possession attached to his name. Amara almost told him about Lorenzo that night. She stopped because she wanted one person to choose her without calculating what her bloodline could offer. Lying beneath the hospital lights, she finally admitted that withholding such a significant truth before marriage had been a mistake. That mistake, however, had not created Ethan's cruelty or given him the right to degrade her. Across town, Lorenzo entered the ballroom alone, leaving his security team in the lobby. The remaining guests recognized him before Ethan did. Mateo handed Lorenzo a phone playing the recorded humiliation. Lorenzo watched it and placed an old photograph beside Amara's abandoned ring. It showed a younger Lorenzo holding a smiling black girl wearing the same pendant. Ethan stared at the child and then in Amara's face on the paused video. "Why do you have that photograph?" he asked. Lorenzo lifted his gaze. "Because the woman you disgraced tonight is my only daughter." For the first time that evening, Ethan had no answer. He looked from the photograph to the wedding ring, searching for a detail that could make Lorenzo's statement impossible. The crowned lion pendant was unmistakable. Ethan had seen Amara wear it throughout their marriage, yet he had never asked what it meant. He had assumed everything important in her life began with him. Around the ballroom, guests lowered their phones. Claire moved away from the champagne table, but Lorenzo noticed. "Stay," he said calmly. "You were comfortable when my daughter stood alone. You should be equally comfortable when the truth has company." Ethan regained enough control to face him. "Amara never told me." "Would her name have changed the evidence you thought you heard?" Lorenzo asked. "No." "Then her identity is not your defense." Lorenzo opened a leather folder and placed a contract on the table. It concerned the proposed $300 million acquisition of Atlantic Meridian Shipping, financed jointly by the Romano and Bellondi companies. Ethan had spent 18 months negotiating it. As the authorized Bellondi representative, Lorenzo signed a temporary suspension of his family's financing commitment pending an independent review. All Bellondi participation in the acquisition is frozen. Unease spread among Ethan's advisors. Without Bellondi financing, the transaction could not close. Marco DeSantis stepped forward. "Don Lorenzo, a personal disagreement should not interfere with business." Lorenzo studied him. "A man who humiliates his pregnant wife before 200 witnesses has demonstrated a failure of judgment. That matters when others are expected to trust his decisions." Ethan barely heard Marco. Amara had married him without asking for shares, property, or access to his accounts. She had continued working after moving into his penthouse. Every memory he had interpreted as modest gratitude now revealed something else. She had never needed his status. She had chosen him. Lorenzo picked up Amara's ring. "You believe losing this acquisition is your punishment," he said. "It is not. Money can be recovered. The consequence you cannot purchase away is that my daughter saw how you treat someone when you believe she has no power." Ethan's face tightened. "The recording proved she betrayed me. It proved that you heard what someone wanted you to hear." Lorenzo had already contacted Sofia Moretti, the Bellondi compliance officer who had spoken with Amara. Their internal policy required business calls involving acquisition security to be recorded, and Sofia had sent Lorenzo the original file after learning what happened at the gala. Matteo connected Lorenzo's phone to the ballroom speakers. Amara's voice filled the room, discussing Ethan's private schedule. Then the conversation continued beyond the point where Claire's version had ended. "Move the meeting," Amara said. "Marco gave the original location to someone outside the Romano organization. If Ethan arrives there, the acquisition will collapse, and Marco will blame the Bellandis." Sophia answered, "Does your husband know you are protecting him?" Amara paused. "Not yet. I need proof before I ask him to doubt the people he trusts." The recording ended. Every face turned toward Marco and Claire. Lorenzo looked at Ethan. "My daughter was trying to save you from someone standing in this room." Marco recovered first. "A recording can be manufactured," he said, but his confidence had weakened. Claire insisted that she had only delivered the file she received. Ethan looked at the woman who had once been his fiancée and the man who had managed his business for 12 years. An hour earlier, he would have defended them before questioning Amara. Now the evening appeared arranged. Claire approached him minutes before the anniversary toast. Marco encouraged an immediate confrontation, and neither suggested verifying the recording. Ethan instructed his attorneys to send a formal preservation notice to the hotel and secure copies of every relevant security file. Lorenzo did not threaten Marco or Claire or try to detain them. "Investigate your house through counsel," he told Ethan. "My daughter is in a hospital because you chose humiliation before truth." Ethan glanced at Amara's ring in Lorenzo's hand. "Which hospital?" She does not want you there. She is carrying my child. Lorenzo's expression hardened. That did not protect her in this room. Ethan left for Midtown Medical Center. A nurse told him that Amara was stable, but had declined visitors. He remained in the waiting area for nearly 2 hours. Shortly after midnight, she allowed him 5 minutes. She sat upright in a pale blue hospital gown while a monitor recorded the baby's steady heartbeat. "The contractions have stopped," she said. "The doctor found no active labor, but I will remain until morning." I heard the original recording. "Then you know I was protecting you. Why did you not tell me?" "I was waiting for proof that Marco leaked the meeting location. If I accused your closest advisor without evidence, you would have demanded evidence." Ethan lowered his eyes. "I should have trusted you. This is larger than trust. You believed I betrayed you, and your first instinct was to humiliate me before an audience. I was angry. Anger did not create those words. It removed the restraint that kept you from saying what part of you already believed." Ethan stopped when she raised a hand. "Your father told me who you are." "I should have told you before we married," Amara said. "Keeping that from you was wrong, and I accept responsibility for it. But my mistake did not give you permission to treat me as property." She reached toward the bedside table and handed him a proposal prepared by Renee Carter, a New York matrimonial attorney Lorenzo had contacted. It was not yet a binding separation agreement. It outlined temporary living arrangements, communication through counsel, and medical boundaries while Renee prepared formal documents. "Have your attorney review it," Amara said. "If we agree, we will sign it before a notary. Tonight, I need you to respect these boundaries." Ethan held the papers without arguing. "Are you ending our marriage?" "Tonight, I am protecting myself and our baby. What happens later depends on whether you can become honest without expecting me to reward you." Over the next 4 days, Ethan honored the temporary boundaries, while an independent forensic team examined the recordings, hotel footage, and communications connected to the Atlantic Meridian acquisition. He suspended Marco and Claire from their positions, disabled their access to Romano's systems, and instructed counsel to preserve their company records. Claire called repeatedly, claiming she could explain, but Ethan forwarded each message to investigators. The forensic team confirmed that Claire's recording had been cut from Sophia Moretti's original file on a computer registered to a consulting company controlled by Marco. Hotel footage showed Marco handing Claire a flash drive 17 minutes before she approached Ethan. A preliminary review of financial records exposed a broader scheme. Over 18 months, Marco had redirected more than $4 million through false consulting contracts and concealed the transfers inside acquisition expenses. If the transaction closed, outside financing reviews would expose him. If it collapsed through an apparent betrayal by Amara, he could blame the Blondies, weaken Ethan, and present himself as the man capable of stabilizing the Romano companies. Claire had helped because Marco promised that removing Amara would restore Claire's influence over Ethan and secure her position as communications director. Each finding proved that Amara had protected Ethan, while the people he trusted prepared his downfall. None of it excused his conduct. Marco supplied the lie, but Ethan chose the cruelty. On the 4th afternoon, Ethan met Marco and Claire in a conference room with attorneys and a forensic accountant present. He did not attempt to interrogate them. He notified them that their contracts were terminated based on the evidence obtained, that the company would pursue lawful recovery of diverted funds, and that outside counsel was referring the records to federal authorities. He also authorized a full independent audit, although it could expose failures under his own leadership. Marco leaned back in his chair. "Your marriage was already weak. I only showed you what you were willing to believe." The accusation struck because it was true. Claire turned toward Ethan. "I thought once she was gone, you would remember what we had." "What we had ended before I met Amara," he replied. "You did not destroy my marriage alone. You gave me an excuse to expose the worst part of myself." Before leaving with her attorney, Claire surrendered her company devices. Marco offered no such cooperation. "You still think evidence controls the story," he said. "By tonight, everyone will see what your wife did to you." Less than an hour later, an edited ballroom video appeared online. It connected Amara's hidden Belandi identity to the suspension of the acquisition and falsely accused her of using her pregnancy to seize control of Ethan's empire. Thousands of strangers began calling her manipulative. Ethan understood Marco's final move. Amara had been publicly wounded once because Ethan chose humiliation. Protecting her now would require him to expose the complete truth, including his own guilt, before the entire country. By 6 o'clock that evening, Ethan's advisors had prepared 3 ways to contain the scandal. One involved challenging the video's ownership, another involved threatening the outlet sharing it, and the third blamed Marco without acknowledging Ethan's conduct. Ethan rejected all 3. "If we erase what I did, we repeat what was done to Amara." He scheduled a live press conference at Romano headquarters and asked his attorneys to release the complete audio recording, a verified forensic summary, and a carefully redacted account of the suspected financial scheme. The detailed banking records went privately to federal prosecutors, so the public statement would not compromise their investigation. Before facing the cameras, Ethan asked Renee whether Amara wished to review his remarks. Renee returned with one message: Amara would not control his confession or let him use her approval as protection. At 7:30, reporters filled the headquarters lobby. Ethan stood alone behind the podium. "Amara Hayes did not betray me," he began. "She learned that someone inside my organization had compromised a private meeting, and she acted to protect me while gathering evidence." The recording used against her was deliberately edited. He released the original audio and the forensic summary. Then he addressed the part no manipulated file could explain. "I publicly degraded my wife while she was carrying our child. Evidence did not force me to do that. Anger, pride, and entitlement made cruelty feel like authority. Her family name does not make my conduct worse, and learning that name does not make her more worthy of respect. She deserved dignity when I believed she had no power beyond her own voice." He confirmed that Marco and Claire had been removed from all Romano companies, and that relevant evidence had been referred to the United States Attorney's Office. He also announced an independent audit of his leadership. Within hours, the original recording displaced Marco's edited story across major news outlets. Public criticism shifted toward Ethan, Marco, and Claire, although Amara's name continued circulating online. Ethan declined every interview request concerning whether she would return. "Her future is hers to decide," he said. Amara watched the press conference from Lorenzo's rented Manhattan townhouse, where she was resting after being discharged that morning. Lorenzo had returned her wedding ring before they left the hospital. "A confession is not a transformation," he said after turning off the television. "I know," Amara replied. The following afternoon, Renee supervised a meeting where both spouses signed and notarized a formal interim separation agreement covering residence, communication, prenatal expenses, and future mediation. Ethan accepted every boundary without negotiation. With the executed copy, he sent a 2-sentence letter. "I will not ask you to come back. I will become the man I should have been, even if you never see him." Amara placed the letter beside her ring and wondered whether his greatest loss might become the beginning of his first honest change. 7 weeks after the gala, Amara reached the 38th week of her pregnancy. Ethan had honored every boundary in the separation agreement. He communicated through Renee unless Amara personally approved a meeting, and he never appeared at her apartment or medical appointments without permission. The completed audit identified serious control failures. Following its recommendations, the boards of 2 Romano companies placed their operations under independent management, while regulators reviewed questionable contracts. Ethan closed the private accounts Marco had exploited, replaced executives who protected secrecy over accountability, and established an outside ethics board with authority to challenge senior decisions. He attended weekly counseling and began examining why he had confused fear with respect and possession with love. He did not send Amara reports about his progress. He understood that advertising every responsible choice would turn change into another performance. Amara returned to community work on a reduced schedule and prepared her apartment for the baby. Ethan created an irrevocable trust for their child, named Amara as the independent trustee, and retained no authority over distributions. When Renee delivered the documents, no private message was attached. That absence affected Amara more than another apology would have. Lorenzo remained in New York and repeatedly offered to take her to Sicily, where Bellondi physicians and staff could surround her. "You would be protected," he said during dinner. Amara set down her glass. "Protected or managed? I left one man because he believed love gave him authority over my choices. I will not reward another man for making the same mistake more politely." Lorenzo slowly nodded. "Then tell me what you need. Trust me to decide." 1 week before her due date, Amara met Ethan in Renee's office. He appeared thinner, and the confidence that once filled every silence had become something quieter. "I know what the audit cost you," she said. "Do you regret releasing it?" "I regret building a life that made truth feel expensive." "And if I never return?" Ethan held her gaze. "Then I will still become the man I should have been. Our child will know that responsibility does not depend on being rewarded." Amara believed he was no longer changing merely to restore his reputation. Belief was not forgiveness, but it was a beginning. 3 nights later, regular contractions woke her shortly after midnight. After timing them at 6 minutes apart, she called her obstetrician and was told to come to the hospital. Lorenzo was in Washington, approximately 225 miles away, and Renee did not answer immediately. Amara called Ethan. "The baby is coming. I need you to take me to the hospital." He arrived 18 minutes later and waited outside her door until she invited him inside. Ethan drove through the quiet Manhattan streets without asking questions that would drain the strength Amara needed. At Midtown Medical Center, he carried her hospital bag but stopped outside the maternity unit when a nurse asked whom she wanted beside her. "He can wait," Amara said. Ethan nodded and took a seat beneath the hallway lights. 2 hours later, Renee arrived, followed by Lorenzo, who had returned from Washington as soon as he received the call. Neither man spoke beyond a restrained greeting. Whatever authority they commanded elsewhere meant nothing outside the room where Amara made every decision. Near sunrise, a nurse approached Ethan. "Amara has asked whether you would like to meet your daughter." He entered quietly and found Amara holding a sleeping baby wrapped in a white blanket. Tears filled his eyes, but he remained several feet from the bed until she extended her hand. "Her name is Evelyn Hayes Romano," she said. Their daughter would carry the legacies of both sides of her family, without belonging entirely to either. "She is beautiful," Ethan whispered. "She is not a second chance," Amara replied. "Do not confuse this moment with forgiveness." "I will not." During the year that followed, Ethan visited only when invited. He learned feeding schedules, attended pediatric appointments with permission, and arrived on time even when Amara limited a visit to 30 minutes. He did not delegate ordinary parenting when it became inconvenient. His consistency with Evelyn gradually became evidence of the patience he had once denied her mother. Federal prosecutors later charged Marco with fraud and obstruction after a grand jury returned an indictment. Claire pleaded guilty to a lesser fraud charge and entered a cooperation agreement. Following the audit, Ethan lost control of several companies, while those that remained operated under independent oversight. He never asked Amara to praise the changes. 1 year after Evelyn's birth, Amara returned to the Imperial Crown Hotel to open the Evelyn Hayes Family Justice Fund, which supported mothers facing financial control, public humiliation, and workplace discrimination. Lorenzo sat in the front row, but the foundation belonged to Amara. Ethan remained near the back until she invited him forward. His remarks were brief. Amara was never mine to control. This year taught me that love is measured by the freedom, dignity, and truth we protect when no reward is promised. He stepped away and returned the room to her. After the guests departed, Amara met him near the place where she had once left her wedding ring. She opened her hand, revealing the gold band. "This does not erase what happened," she said. "It means I am willing to continue counseling and see what we can rebuild." Ethan did not reach for the ring. "The choice must remain yours." Amara studied the man who had spent a year proving that he understood the difference between possession and devotion. She slipped the ring onto her own finger, then reached for his hand. She returned not because she needed his name, his protection, or his empire, but because she remained free to choose both love and the power to walk away.